As a professional streamer, you have a unique set of problems you have to deal with. For one, there's really no way to advertise what you're producing. I don't have a huge amount of experience with the Twitch platform, but it doesn't seem particularly great at showing you new content creators, not like YouTube is. Because of that, you basically have to stream as often as you can for as long as you can to accumulate any sort of audience at all. And in many ways, it's more or less impossible to build an audience on the platform as it stands today unless you discover a niche before anyone else does. Because of this, it's very difficult to take any time away from the platform. When you make your money through donations, live streams, and whatever else, you basically have to maximize all of your time and minimize your solo time. Not a whole lot of people are willing to do that, which is why most people who do try to become a professional streamer crash and burn. South Koreans took it to another level though. One of the few things that you're generally expected to do alone when you stream is eat. You eat alone, you sleep alone, you go to the bathroom alone, unless you're Dr. Disrespect, in which case you go to the bathroom in the public with a camera. Not in South Korea. South Korea has a kind of superstition around eating the same way here in America we have around drinking. You're not supposed to do it alone because it's usually a sign of bad health, of bad habits. But because of the way modern life is, it's very difficult to sync up the time with friends or family to have a big hearty meal. More so if you're a streamer who has to minimize time away from your screen. The answer to this conundrum was mukbangs. A mukbang, which translates roughly to eatcast, is basically a streamer filming themselves eating with the intention that you too will eat alongside it. The idea is by doing this, you can substitute the social aspect of eating. This oftentimes gets a odd reception from people unfamiliar with the concept. It seems bizarre to eat along with someone who's not physically there. But is it? I am one of those people who didn't really get mukbangs, but the more I looked into it, the more it did kind of make sense. I remember watching a documentary when Soylent first hit the shelves. It was a Vice documentary where a dude had drank nothing but Soylent for 30 days. He noted that he didn't feel bad, he felt strong enough, he had all the nutrition he needed, but he felt alienated because while his friends would go out to eat, he couldn't join them. Even if he was at the table, he wasn't eating along with them, and it made him feel like an outsider. When they interviewed some scientists about this, they all agreed. That's very natural. Eating is a social activity that we are expected to partake with other people. And when you put it that way, it does make sense. Humans are pack animals. We would obviously eat in packs because we're more vulnerable when we're eating, so we'd want other people to watch our backs. Even if this didn't occur naturally while we were in the hunter-gatherer stage, societies have us eat together out of convenience. Soldiers and students just commune in large shifts because it's the most effective way to feed a lot of people. It's become ingrained in human society that we eat together. So while it may seem bizarre to watch someone eat food, it's a more social event than playing a video game or watching a movie with someone through a screen. Those are things that in real life we get angry at people who try and detract from that by making it social. You're expected to do it completely alone. There's a reason why people say you shouldn't actually take dates to movies, but you should take them to dinner, because in one of those, you can actually get to know the person while it's happening around you. But like a lot of things that we take from the Far East, the American rendition of mukbangs is considerably less classy, less nuanced. The American mukbanger is not someone trying to supplement their social life with people through a screen, but someone who is trying to alleviate the guilt they feel from engorging themselves on monstrous amounts of awful food by getting paid to do it. Rarely do American mukbangers live stream. Rarely is there a social aspect to them. They rarely interact with their audience. They can't interact with their audience directly if it's not a live stream, and I rarely see any of them actually take suggestions or comments from their comment section and respond to them in any meaningful capacity. Most Americans who perform mukbangs tend to be either white trash or hood rats. They're usually lower class, they're usually not making a whole lot of money, and they're usually filming it on their phone, which looks like it was bought out of someone else's trunk. I know I spent a lot of time sort of cutting out why mukbangs aren't weird, but I still don't really get it. I'm not one of those people who sat down and watched the Food Network for hours at a time. It always seemed kind of pointless to me. You could spend that time actually making the food if you put forth any effort at all. So the idea of watching other people eat just seems to make me hungry. I do fine being obese by eating out of boredom. I don't need more motivation to do it. So I really had no interest in the mukbang community. But that all changed when I was introduced to one man, Nikocado Avocado.
Like, what? Why is he so good? 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 It's so good. There's fucking grasshoppers in my curtains.
Who is Nikocado Avocado? Originally a vegan YouTuber, Nick was associated with a far healthier lifestyle than you'd think most mukbangers would have. At some point he gave it up, saying that vegans were militant and intolerant, but most people tend to believe that Nick simply wanted to be more gluttonous and saw that there was a lot more money in eating a ton of Taco Bell than eating a few pounds of kale. Since then, Nick has become a poster child for excess, everything wrong with the American rendition of mukbang. He's gotten incredibly fat over the last few years, and he has injected every one of his videos with his nearly constant emotional fits. Nick is a very unstable person, and he seems to only be able to cry in front of a camera, but when there's a camera in front of him, he will cry. There are dozens of videos of Nick crying and eating. One video that is, I consider, a definitive Nikocado video involves him in a Thailand hotel with his shirt off eating what looks like undercooked calzones? I have no idea what it is he's eating. It looks like half-cooked dough stuffed with pepperoni and cheese. He cries for the entire length of the video, and while it's not appetizing, I can't say that it's not immensely entertaining. Perhaps the perfect Nikocado Avocado video is the one where he cooks a massive batch of Korean spicy noodles for some sort of asinine challenge. In this video, Nick dunks 14 slices of what I think is provolone cheese into his ramen.
Are you guys watching 8, 9, 10, 11, 12?
Something that no self-respecting adult would ever do, and then dumps a stick of butter into the same pot.
And let's add our stick of butter. It's not even funny.
A stick of butter, by the way, is longer than it is wide. If it's wider than it is long, it's a block of butter. A block of butter. What makes this video so fantastic is, while stirring his sauces and showing off his amazing creation, some of the boiling hot sauce gets in Nick's eye.
Ow, my eyeball!
It's really funny. It's really, really funny. My favorite part of that whole fiasco is that when Nick is waiting for his boyfriend to come and wash out the hot sauce from his eye, he stops and continues to stir the ramen, so that way it doesn't burn, because he intends to continue his mukbang where he will eat the rest of this horrific concoction he has put together. And then he did it again. Now, some of you may be wondering where all the stress in Nick's life seems to be coming from. He's blubbering and crying in nearly every one of his videos, so what's causing it all? Is he just melodramatic? Well, not quite. Most of the stress in Nick's life comes from his relationship with his boyfriend turned husband, turned ex-boyfriend, turned ex-husband, turned husband again, whatever the fuck. Orlin. Orlin and Nick met because of Orlin's diet. Orlin has some nondescript autoimmune disease, and it seems to mostly impact his kidneys. So in order to lower the stress of his kidney, he stuck to mostly eating raw foods. Not raw meats and shit like that. You know, stuff like fruits, vegetables, nuts. That alleviates his symptoms a bit, and it makes life a little easier to get through. He met Nick because Nick was also into this same sort of weird health nut space, and the two really seemed to hit it off. But when Nick decided to get out of that and start eating a wider range of foods, Orlin seemed to follow suit. Some people interpret this as Orlin wanting to maintain the first real relationship of his life. Nick and Orlin seem to have met when they were pretty young, and neither of them seem to have much experience in relationships outside of this one in particular. Note, I say relationships and not experience with sex. We'll get to that, trust me. But for whatever reason, Orlin also became something of a mukbanger. But for the most part, you see Orlin in Nick's videos, usually acting as cameraman or support. As I said before, he's the one who comes and flushes Nick's eye out in the ramen video. So as you might imagine, Orlin's sickness causes a lot of stress. It's also very expensive. To help alleviate the cost of his medical care, he moved to Colombia, of all places. I don't know the specifics of why Colombia. Orlin may have originally been from there, and it was just easier to be closer to family when dealing with these sort of issues. But Nick couldn't quite follow suit. Not for lack of trying. Nick comes and visits Colombia several months out of the year on a tourist visa, but those tend to max out somewhere around 200 days, and Colombia requires you to leave the country for about a month or two before you're allowed to come back with a new visa. It's a little difficult to be in a relationship with someone when you can't see them for a month or two. As you can imagine, it's a lot of stress, especially if that person is dealing with an illness that neither of you are really educated on or fully understand. One of Nick's more notorious videos is the one where he reveals that he's actually being deported from Colombia. Mostly because people can't believe that Colombia would actually eject an American. It's kind of a shithole nation. As I understand it, Nick was on a tourist visa and he was applying for a marriage visa, which would allow him to stay in the country all year round. But the marriage visa didn't go through, and in the meantime, his tourist visa had expired. If I had to guess, Nick probably thought there was some sort of grace period while he was waiting for the marriage visa, because if it did go through, he'd never have to leave. He then got the notice that he had to leave the country immediately. Nick milked this for all it was worth, and while devastating, Nick didn't actually have to leave the country, or rather, Nick didn't actually leave Colombia until February. He was allowed to keep his affairs in order, and as far as I know, he was even granted another tourist visa after a short time away. So melodrama definitely plays a role in Nick's constant emotional problems, but there is legitimate stress there. It must be very terrifying to have to be away from someone you love while they're going through this awful sickness that they can't really cure. And it doesn't seem to be the only problem Orlin and Nick are going through. There's one video where Orlin is in tears because he thinks he may have contracted some form of cancer or that he may have some additional disease. But he's terrified to go to the doctor and find out that it's another incurable problem that'll just stress him out more. And the two don't really know how to deal with that.
What I told you is that you were saying, why don't you go to a doctor? But, well, the reason I don't want to go to a doctor is because it might be cancer, and I don't want to know that. Do you think I want to know that? I just want to not think about it. What do you want me to think it is? You want me to just go to a doctor like, oh yeah, it's a type of cancer. How do you want to get treated? Do you want me to just do that?
No. Well, yeah, wouldn't you rather know? Wouldn't
You want me to get chemo? Will that make me better? With my get chemo?
You wouldn't do chemo, but you would know. And
Then what's the point of going? So I just get stressed out about having cancer now. On top of...
It would be a very sweet moment if Nick wasn't ripping apart a rotisserie chicken during the entire video. With that in mind, it's easy to start to feel sympathetic for Nick. He has someone he loves that is going through an awful time that they can't really fix, and they're pulled apart by bureaucracy. It must be very frustrating. Or you would be able to sympathize if it wasn't for how Nick treated Orlin, which is like fucking shit.
Okay. Are you nervous? Yes, I'm nervous. Why? It's not funny. Alright, let's go now. Okay, so... okay. We're gonna tell a story. Hi, guys!
As previously stated, Nick can't be in Colombia all throughout the year. His tourist visa only allows him to be in there for 3, maybe 4 months, somewhere around there, after which he has to go back home or just out of the country for a set amount of time before he can apply for another visa and then come back in. Usually, Nick uses that time to reconvene with family, head back to the States, see old friends, let them know what it's like in Colombia. But one year, Nick decided instead to go globe hopping, go from country to country, continent to continent, trying out different foods, different locales, and film all of it on his channel. Pretty smart idea, all things considered, for what is basically a food tasting channel. People probably don't care all that much about how exotic or unique the food that Nick eats is, but there's a novelty to watching someone eat fast food from another country, or to see how the Chinese kill each other by forcing them to eat KFC to get chocobo mounts in Final Fantasy. That's all well and good. It makes sense, a good business proposition, good way to see the world while you're still young. Only problem is Nick decided to fuck a bunch of dudes while he was doing it. The exact count of how many people Nick cheated on Orlin with is ambiguous, anywhere from 6 to a dozen, but what's certain is Nick was aiming much higher. By almost every account, including his own, Nick tried to sleep with more people than he ended up sleeping with. He just wasn't that good at fucking dudes. Not quite as good as James Taylor is, apparently. Kind of a scumfuck thing to do to your lover, your boyfriend, the love of your life, who is seemingly constantly dying of some nondescript disease. But what's worse is when you decide to bring a little bit of it back home to him. While on his globe-trotting dick heist, Nick ended up contracting a few STDs. Herpes for himself, and chlamydia, which he brought home and ended up giving to his boyfriend. Here's the thing about chlamydia. It's an infection. One that, for most people, isn't too damning. It can be bad, but thankfully, modern antibiotics can deal with it pretty quickly. But if you, say, have a compromised immune system, maybe some of your organs in particular are very vulnerable, chlamydia is potentially deadly. There was a good chance that Orlin's kidneys would have died from the chlamydia he contracted from Nick. Now, thankfully, he didn't. As far as I can tell, he was able to get it treated, and it was all A-okay. But for most people, that's enough of a reason to completely cut someone out of your life. Luckily for Nick, Orlin wasn't quite willing to do that. Now, Orlin's involvement in Nick's life is a little harder to pin down. We know he's in his videos, we know they have drama together, we know he's in and out of Nick's life, blah, 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 blah. But it's a little harder to pin down his motivations, his reasons for doing things. I believe he has a YouTube channel, but it's mostly dead. He's much better at keeping his personal life and involvement out of his social media presence than Nick is. But I don't think it's very hard to understand why Orlin would be a little hesitant to cut Nick from his life entirely. The two of them met when they were both very young. I think they were still in high school. They were more than likely each other's first serious relationship. And Nick has stood by Orlin through this traumatizing disease he's had for maybe close to half a decade at this point. Again, the time frame is a little hard to pin down, but for them, they've been together for a long time, and it's difficult to let go of that. But that just makes Nick come off as worse. This was the only real relationship Nick seems to have ever had, and he threw it away to fuck a bunch of random dudes, most of whom probably didn't even speak his language. There is a video with Nick and Orlin where they sort of go through all the drama and stuff, and I find Orlin bizarrely disconnected. If you told me this was not Nick's husband, but his friend or someone who is just there to sort of force him to do it, I would believe you. Orlin talks to Nick with the same sort of cadence that you might to a friend who is talking about cheating. You're not really involved in it, it doesn't really affect you, but you want your friend to be a better person, so when he tries to make excuses for himself, you sort of pump the brakes for him. Like, no, you tried to do this, or no, don't try to frame it this way, you know what you were doing, stuff like that. There's no anger there, but there's definitely a little bit of, come on man, be honest with yourself. This makes Orlin look terrifying to me, but my friend Aquanaz swears that Orlin is incredibly angry and it's just hidden beneath the surface. He's doing a good job of hiding it. Or according to him, he's not even doing a good job of hiding it, and I'm just not seeing it because I'm stupid. I'll leave you to judge that for yourselves, but either way, I feel like the core point we're trying to take away from this is that Nikocado Avocado is a piece of shit. And I feel like I've made that point properly. There is another question on top of this, though. Is Orlin also a piece of shit? From everything I've described so far, Orlin sounds like a victim of Nick's bullshit. But there is one thing that stood out to me that might paint Orlin in a slightly more negative light. Nick and Orlin had a pet sloth for a while. There's not a whole lot of footage of the sloth. I can't find it. Apparently it attacked Nick, and he ended up giving it to a sanctuary in Florida. God knows how a sloth attacks someone, but apparently that's what happened. There's no footage of that. He removed a lot of the videos of the sloth. It's hard to find stuff about the sloth. Really wanted footage of the sloth, but I couldn't find any. Where one of the videos that's still up on his channel with the sloth had a comment that was pinned that said, "Me and my sloth eating french fries," or something to that effect. I think they were eating fruit or something. And I clicked on it because I wanted to see more of the sloth. I was hoping I could keep like daisy chaining through sloth videos and find the one where he references the sloth attacking him. Could not. That video took me to some random video of Nick at some Asian buffet in China or some shit. I got clickbaited, oh no! Who gives a shit? Everyone does that. I really don't care that much. I wasn't even going to bring it up. It's fine. But there's another video. This video is Nick discussing Orlin's attempted suicide. And this is not something that happened in the past. This is not something that happened recently. This is something that, from what I can tell, happened minutes before he started recording the video. he and Orlin got in a fight, and Orlin, almost without realizing it, slit his wrist open on a kitchen knife that he was using to cut up food. Nick is crying, he's terrified, he's upset. It's a sad video. I probably wouldn't have brought it up because I feel like the other video is enough to demonstrate their relationship and whatnot. But top comment pinned linked to a video titled "Me and My Husband Orlin." Some footage of him and Orlin. There's not a whole lot of footage of him and Orlin, so I wanted to see this. I wanted to get some footage of them together. I wanted to see them interacting when they're not eating. Took me back to that China buffet video, which does not have Orlin in it. Orlin's not even making the video. The video is clearly being filmed by a camera that Nick has placed across from himself stationary. So here's the question. Did Orlin try to commit suicide, and then Nick decided after the fact to use it to funnel views into one of his side channels? Or did Nick and Orlin fake this attempted suicide to funnel views to a side channel? In one of those scenarios, Nick and Orlin are co-conspirators, and both of them are just the worst type of fucking people imaginable. And in the other one, Nick is somehow twice as awful as I thought he was. And that may be a bit beyond the scope of my video and my investigation, because all it really comes down to is Nick is still a shitty person that you probably don't want to spend any time supporting if you're just watching him to watch him eat food. More recently, Nick has shifted his content away from crying and eating food to drama with other people in the mukbang community. As far as I can tell, it started in earnest with a woman named Trisha Paytas. Trisha Paytas is a Instagram model slash mukbanger slash some other bullshit that I don't care about, and you probably don't either. As far as I understand it, H3H3, Ethan Klein, poked fun at her very obviously photoshopped Instagram photos on his podcast. She fired back. He sort of pushed back against it. Drew a lot of heat. I didn't really pay attention to it. The point is, it was kind of in to talk shit about Trisha Paytas because the drama community on YouTube is a giant incestuous frauding circle of some sort. Been saying fraudage a whole lot. If you don't know what frauding is, Google it. You'll thank me later. So because it was in to hate on Trisha Paytas and because Nick had experience with her, no one really looked deeper into it when he started claiming some shit about her. As Nick puts it, he had done a cover of a Trisha Paytas song. She's a singer, obviously. And she had loved it. She'd featured it on her channel, and they had talked about collaborating. But she sort of ghosted Nick. When he went to LA to collaborate with her, she didn't really show up or respond or anything. And when he talked about it on social media, she was like, I don't know who this person is. I never talked about this. This dude's a weirdo. So people use that as ammunition against Trisha Paytas. YouTube user Priming, who's a pretty solid channel, made a video talking about this in depth. I'll link it below. Priming basically explains in greater detail how bizarre of a behavior this is. Yeah, Trisha Paytas ghosted the dude, but you're the one who went to LA to maybe collaborate with someone who'd only texted you like 6 times. Now, knowing what I now know, the reason he may have gone to LA was part of his whole globe-trotting venture. He may have been going there anyway. I know he's gone to Las Vegas to the Heart Attack Grill with Hungry Fat Chick, which is someone's name. It's not something I said about them. That's their name. I swear to God. I swear to God. Don't get mad at me about that, alright? So he may have just gone in the area in general and sort of gambled it away. It wasn't like he had put out a ton of money to get out there or anything. But still, it's hard to see Nick as the victim when he seemingly didn't do the basic level of follow-ups and fact checks you'd expect for someone going out of their way to work with someone else. That's the only bit of real Nikocado drama that I've followed. I know he's got issues with other people in the community. I know he has a dozen fucking videos about a dozen people. And chances are, some of them are probably legitimate issues. But as I've laid out, Nick is at best untrustworthy, and at worst, an outright fabricator. If he was willing to lie about his husband trying to commit suicide, why wouldn't he lie about the behavior of people on YouTube that he's trying to collaborate with? It just poisons the whole well, doesn't it? There's zero reason to ever listen to Nick, even when he offers proof, because he's shown that he has no moral fiber, he has no backbone, and he's willing to go pretty far for a quick buck. He's not someone that you can trust. He's not someone that you can listen to. And if he's your source for bullshit problems with other people, maybe find another source. Because chances are, if Nick's willing to lie about the person he supposedly loves trying to kill themselves, he's probably willing to lie about someone that he's never actually met before. There will doubtlessly be more Nikocado drama. There will be more videos where Nick cries and eats. More videos where he talks about bullshit drama that I don't really care about. But I'll probably watch the videos where he cries. And if you continue to do it too, I can't blame you. Because they're entertaining. And frankly, that's all that really matters. If someone entertains you, I believe they deserve compensation for that. Even if it's just watching ads. Even if it's just being in the analytics so more people see that video. In some way, I feel that's deserved. But I feel like you should probably know what a shitty scumfuck he is under the surface as well. So that way, you can decide if you want to be more direct with your compensation. And if you don't like those aspects of Nick's personality, maybe you should cut him out of your entertainment cycle entirely. There's no shortage of fat people eating food on the internet, as I will now demonstrate.
3 days ago, this Red Lobster fired my life partner, Super Saiyan Richie Aquinas, from being a sanitation officer because he was eating the leftovers. They think they're too good for my lover. Here's what I think of you, Joe Bingham, CEO of Red Lobster. You've no fucking idea what war you just started. This is your wife. This is your daughter. This is your business. And this is me. Coming at you from the Pontiac Silverdome. Where my lover defeated Triple H in a Sal Cal fist fight. Enough talk, John Kroger. It's time for action. This was my favorite shirt.
Thank you.